Okay, Bradley, what's your second tip for us, please?
Okay, so second tip, I've gone for a slightly different area away from kind of retrieval and memory, is about how to develop resilient students and how to develop resilience, because I think that's in danger of almost becoming a cliche or another buzzword. Everyone wants resilience and independent learners, and yet some of the research out there I think is really fascinating. And this tip is from my favourite research paper on resilience. They're talking about to help develop a resilient environment. The two factors you need to consider is having high levels of challenge, so setting the bar high, teach the top, high expectations, but also combining that with high levels of support. So do the students feel included, part of the group? Do they know who to turn to for emotional support? And why I quite like that is I think a lot of the resilience focus tends to be on how do I motivate a student and how do I help develop his or her resilience, whereas actually if we start thinking about it in terms of an environmental or organisational level, what does a classroom that has high challenge and high support look like? Because if it only has high challenge and doesn't have high support, you tend to see stuff like perfectionism, fear of failure, burnout and stress. And I think we do a lot of stuff around high expectations, and that's fairly well known. And there's been a big focus on that in the last few years. But combining that with high levels of support, I think is interesting. Because again, looking back at my early career, I was so supportive and I was so inclusive and I wanted to help everyone and I didn't want anyone to feel uncomfortable, that I look back and I go, as well as being really supportive, was I actually just subtly lowering the level of challenge and almost depriving them of that healthy struggle? And I think that's a nice practical starting point for to help develop resilient students. We need both high challenge and high support.
Love it, love it. Well, okay, let's dive into this a little bit more then. This could be a terrible question, Bradley, so please forgive me on this one. But what will be some of the features of a classroom that have this high challenge and high support? What are some of the practical things a teacher could do to get this balance?
So I think looking at high challenge, that axis of it first, I think having high expectations, not necessarily high expectations around outcome, but high expectations around attitude and habits and work ethic. I think fundamentally believing that all students can improve, can learn and can develop. And I know, I don't know if I'm slightly different to some people on this. I think people have been a bit too quick to dismiss some of the growth mindset area, because I think there is some really good stuff within there. It's complicated, but at a fundamental level, believing that every child can improve and can learn, and I'm going to work hard with that child to ask them challenging questions, to believe they can do more than they could do last week. That, I think, is a hallmark of this high expectations, this high challenge. And so not necessarily always letting students self-select which level of difficulty, I think is kind of pitched with high challenge. I think high support includes, I think it's quite closely linked to the research on feedback. Feedback on the task, feedback on their processes, on their self-regulation, as opposed to just feedback on outcome or on them as a person. I think having a really warm but formal relationship, I think, with students is important. So I don't know if you found any. I haven't really been able to find any research that find that we learn more from someone that we like. I think it's one of these big kind of myths or misconceptions. But I do think the teacher-student relationship is really important. I just don't think it's based on likability. So I think it's based on, do I trust that you are going to challenge me and stretch me and help me improve? And do I also kind of trust that you're going to support me when I struggle and fail? And so I think that reliability and trust is probably linked to this challenge and support, as opposed to just necessarily likability and popularity.
It's really, really interesting, this. So just a couple of points on this one. First, I agree with you. I've been guilty of this in terms of the growth mindset research. Like, first I was all for it, then I started reading research and I thought, oh, this is a load of nonsense, so I dismissed everything. And now obviously you think, no, actually, it can't all be nonsense. There's some real good stuff in there. One thing that I think, to pick up on what you've said there, that feels really important to me is growth mindset, in the sense that of a teacher having it of their kids, not just the kids having it of themselves. So teacher really believing that this isn't a bottom set who have got like they'll never get beyond this level, but thinking, no, you know what, they could do. And having that mindset, that feels like it's got no kind of negative side to it whatsoever as a teacher. That feels really important.
There's one really cool study that looked at teacher mindset on student performance. And what they found is, so they gave a hypothetical situation where they said to the teacher, they actually did maths, they said it's the first maths exam of the year, one of your students does really badly, how do you respond to that student? What's your approach? And they said teachers with the growth mindset were much more likely to focus on what they call strategy. They said it's too early to tell how good the kid could be, sample size of 1, I will set them more challenge. I'll set them lots of questions. I will talk them through the step-by-step process of how to answer them. Whereas those with the fixed mindset teachers, they were more likely to go, I'll go for a comfort approach, which is let me make you feel better about your failure. You know, not everyone can be good at math. And what made this study really cool is when they then interviewed students and they said, if you did badly in your exam and your teacher said either A or B, how would you feel? A lot of the students misinterpreted this comfort approach as proof that the teacher didn't believe they could ever get better.
Right.
So they're making me feel better because this is my limit. Whereas those who had been exposed to the strategy approach had much higher self-expectation and were more motivated and indeed more resilient to apply this sort of stuff. And I think that's a nice indication of growth mindset might not be a straight line from teacher to student, but it influences teacher decision-making, which influences student approach. And that's where I think it's linked to this high challenge of, I believe you can all get better, and I'm going to show you how to get better. But I think that's key to it.
It's really interesting, really interesting. And the other thing I was going to say on that is just you mentioned struggle. My kind of working theory with struggle is, well, first I used to think struggle is always a good thing, like get the kids struggling, they're going to learn and so on. And then where I'm at the moment is that certainly you don't want kids to give up in the first sign of struggle, because that's almost kind of the opposite of resilience. Yeah. But I think one thing that you've got to bear in mind is students' kind of past experience, in my domain in mathematics, kind of students' past experience of their kind of relationship with maths, or how much success they've had with maths. Because if you take two students, one of whom has had a lot of experience of success in maths over the past, if they're struggling on a problem, they're likely to have the belief that if I keep struggling, I'll probably get there in the end. Or even if I don't get there in the end, it's okay, because it's just one small problem and I've got loads of other things that I do understand. Versus another kid who's struggling, who thinks, this is yet another thing I don't understand, I'm going to waste my time going through this, and so on and so forth. So there's kind of kids' prior experience in terms of their resilience feels really important, and something important for teachers to know, because you can't just go in with this kind of blanket strategy that I'm going to do the same thing with all kids or with all different classes, because for me anyway, their prior experience feels like a critical variable in this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, if you look at some of the research on self-efficacy, which is basically domain-specific confidence, like how confident do I feel at maths, previous performance is the biggest predictor of someone's self-efficacy, so that would make sense. So where you're at with struggle is kind of where I'm at with mistakes. I went for the, mistakes are good and can help you learn, and now I kind of think mistakes could be good and they can help you learn, but only if there's good feedback, only if the environment's right, or else you're just doomed to repeat the mistake, and that's not good. And I think with stuff like resilience, it's easy to almost fetish or like sensationalize mistakes and struggle, whereas like I don't want my students failing, I do want them learning and succeeding and doing well, but it's just how we manage that process to get there, I guess.
Brilliant.